I stood there on the porch that night, my wrinkled hands clutching the brass handle of my front door, trembling not from the cold, but from the shock of what had just happened. My own daughter-in-law, Rachel, had slammed the door in my face, my door in my house, and then I heard the sound that would forever burn in my memory, the click of the lock. I knocked. I called her name. I even shouted for my son, hoping he would come. But instead of his voice, all I heard was silence inside, followed by muffled laughter. My legs nearly gave way beneath me. 70 years of life, 70 years of building, sacrificing, and giving. And here I was, standing like a beggar outside the home I had worked so hard to build. But what Rachel didn't know was this. The key to that house wasn't just the one she had turned in the lock. There was another key, and I was the only one who knew about it. I pressed my palm against the door, holding back the tears that threatened to fall. I could have walked away. I could have let her think she had won. But deep inside me, a fire began to burn, a fire that whispered, asterisk. No one throws me out of my own home, asterisk. And that, my dear, was the beginning of everything. Now, let me take you back, because to understand how it all came to this, me, locked out of my own house, by the woman who was supposed to call me Mom, you need to know my story. You need to know who I am, what I have lived through, and why kindness is both a blessing and sometimes a weapon others use against you. My name is Margaret Evans. I am 70 years old, and for most of my life, I believed in kindness above everything else. I believed that if you gave love, it would return to you. And for a long time, that belief carried me. But sometimes, life tests your kindness in ways you never expect. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the daughter of a carpenter and a schoolteacher. My parents didn't have much money, but they had plenty of heart. My father taught me how to work hard with my hands, and my mother taught me to read every book I could find. From them, I learned that you don't need riches to live a rich life. You need compassion, honesty, and faith. When I was 19, I met my husband, William. He was tall, with a steady gaze that made you feel safe. We married young, and for almost 50 years, he was my partner, my strength, and my home. Together, we raised our only son, Michael, who became my pride and joy. But life has its seasons. William passed away 5 years ago, leaving me with memories sweeter than honey, but also a loneliness that sometimes ached so deep it kept me awake at night. Michael was all I had left. So when he married Rachel, I welcomed her with open arms. I told myself, asterisk, now I have a daughter too, asterisk. At first, everything was fine. Rachel was polite, charming even. She'd bring me flowers on Sundays, sit at my kitchen table, and ask me about my recipes. I thought we were building something, a bond, a family. I wanted so badly for her to feel like she belonged. But people can wear masks. Over time, little cracks began to show. She would roll her eyes when I told stories from the past. She'd mock the way I still sewed my own clothes, calling it old-fashioned. She'd make small comments to Michael when she thought I couldn't hear, whispering things that set him against me. And then the distance began. Michael started visiting less, calling less. When I asked him why, he said he was busy, that work and marriage were demanding. But in my heart, I knew Rachel was behind it. She didn't want me close. Still, I held on to kindness. I kept cooking meals and leaving them at their doorstep. I kept knitting little scarves and sweaters for the grandchildren I dreamed of having one day. I told myself love would win. But kindness alone doesn't always protect you. The day things reached their peak, it started so normal. I had gone into town to buy some groceries. I remember carrying bags heavy with potatoes, flour, and apples for pie. When I got home, The first thing I noticed was Rachel's car parked in the driveway. I smiled to myself, thinking, asterisk, oh, good. Maybe she's come to visit. Asterisk, but when I reached the porch and tried to open the front door, it wouldn't budge. I knocked gently, then harder. Finally, I called out, Rachel? It's me, Margaret. Open the door. No answer. I tried again, my voice louder this time. Rachel, I need to get inside. Please, open up. And then I heard it. Her footsteps, slow, deliberate. She came to the door and, with a smile I could hear in her voice, she said, You don't live here anymore. Before I could even respond, the door slammed shut, and then the lock clicked. For a moment, the world around me spun. My groceries fell from my arms, apples rolling across the porch. My heart pounded so loudly, I thought it might burst. My knees felt weak, my breath shallow. I leaned against the wall, clutching the doorframe as if it might keep me upright. How could she? How could my own son's wife lock me out like a stranger? But she underestimated me. Because while Rachel thought she had all the power, she didn't know about the little iron key I kept hidden, the one I hadn't touched in years. The one that opened more than just a door, it opened secrets she couldn't even imagine. I didn't use it that night. No, I was too shaken, too broken. But I knew one thing. As I walked away from that porch, my groceries still scattered on the ground. Rachel had started a war she wasn't ready to finish. And so, as the moon rose high over that cold Ohio night, I made myself a promise. She could laugh now, she could gloat, but one day soon she would learn the truth. She thought she had locked me out, but in reality, she had just unlocked something much bigger. That was the night everything changed. And what came after? Well, it was both the darkest and the most powerful time of my life. But before I tell you what I did with that key, let me take you back to how the cracks in our family grew deeper, because it didn't all happen in one night. It began long before, with moments so small you might have missed them, but together, they built the storm that would one day knock me off my porch and into a fight I never saw coming. It started with Michael's first year of marriage. Michael's first year of marriage was supposed to be a celebration of new beginnings. I remember the wedding day as if it happened yesterday, the way my son stood tall in his dark suit, his face glowing with happiness as Rachel walked down the aisle in white lace. I cried so much that day, not out of sadness, but because I believed my boy had found a partner who would love him the way I had always prayed for. After the wedding, I tried to give them space. I didn't want to be the type of mother-in-law who hovered or interfered. Still, I invited them over every Sunday for dinner. I cooked the same dishes Michael had grown up, with roast chicken with rosemary, mashed potatoes, and my famous apple pie. Rachel would smile politely, eat a little, and then spend most of the evening scrolling through her phone. At first, I thought it was nerves. Maybe she wasn't used to family dinners. So I told myself, give her time, she'll warm up. But time passed, and things didn't get better. I noticed Michael changing. He used to call me every other day, even if it was just to say, "Hi, Mom, how are you doing?" After the wedding, the calls came less and less. Then, sometimes, he wouldn't answer at all. One evening, I called while making stew, and Rachel picked up instead. "Oh, hi, Margaret," she said flatly, not even calling me Mom. "Michael's busy right now. He'll call you back." But he never did. Still, I tried to stay positive. I told myself, it was just the adjustment of marriage, the newness of it all. People get busy. Love requires patience, after all. One afternoon, I decided to surprise them. I baked a loaf of banana bread and walked the short distance to their home. When I arrived, I heard their voices through the open kitchen window. "She's always around, Michael. Rachel was saying, her tone sharp. "It's like she doesn't realize you're a grown man now. We need space. We're married. You're not her little boy anymore." I froze where I stood, clutching the warm loaf in my hands. Michael's voice followed, quieter, almost hesitant. "She means well, Rachel. She's alone since Dad passed. You know that." Rachel sighed, exasperated. "That's not my problem, Michael. If she's lonely, she can make friends. We have our own lives now." My heart cracked that day, not because Rachel spoke harshly, but because my son didn't defend me the way I hoped he would. He didn't say, "She's my mother, she's family, she belongs here." Instead, he stayed quiet. I walked back home without knocking on the door, my banana bread cooling in the breeze. That was one of the lows, one of those quiet heartbreaks that feel like knives slipping between your ribs. Still, I didn't give up. I believed that if I just kept showing kindness, things would change. I kept bringing them food, sending Michael little gifts, and leaving encouraging notes on their doorstep. "Thinking of you. Love you always. Proud of you." But kindness without boundaries can sometimes make people think you are weak. The next extreme moment came months later, on Thanksgiving. I had been looking forward to it all year. Holidays were always big in our family, lots of food, laughter, and stories around the table. I decorated the house, roasted a turkey, and baked 3 pies. Pumpkin, pecan, and of course, apple. I set the table with the fine china William and I had bought decades ago, polishing each plate until it gleamed. Candles flickered, the smell of cinnamon filled the air, and my heart swelled with anticipation. I waited and waited. The hours passed, the food grew cold, and no one came. Not Michael, not Rachel. I finally called, and this time, Michael answered. His voice was rushed, distant. "Oh, Mom, I'm sorry. We decided to spend Thanksgiving with Rachel's parents this year. I thought Rachel told you." Tears stung my eyes as I stared at the empty table before me. The feast I had prepared, the love I had poured into every dish, it all sat untouched. I whispered, "Michael, you could have told me." He hesitated, then said, "We'll come by next time, Mom. Don't worry." But the line went dead before I could respond. I sat there that night, alone in a room filled with food for 12 people, and realized something important. Kindness is beautiful, yes, but it also requires courage. You can't keep giving pieces of yourself to people who take without gratitude. I decided that night to stop chasing after them. If they wanted me in their lives, they would have to show it. I didn't know it then, but that small decision planted the seed for the strength I would need later. The strength that would rise up the day Rachel slammed the door in my face. But the road to that moment wasn't straight. There were more lows, of course. Silent phone calls, missed birthdays, Rachel's cold stares when I did see her. And there were small highs too, the rare times when Michael hugged me tightly, whispering, "Love you, Mom," in a voice that reminded me of the little boy he once was. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the day when Rachel would take things too far. It was a bright spring morning. The air was fresh, the grass still damp with dew. I was tending to my rose bushes in the front yard, humming an old hymn, when I heard the sound of a car pulling into my driveway. Rachel stepped out, her sunglasses perched high on her head. Her lips curved into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. "Good morning, Margaret," she said, her voice sweet like honey but sharp like glass. I wiped my hands on my apron and forced a smile. "Rachel, what brings you here?" She looked around the yard, then at the house, as if she were surveying something that belonged to her. "Oh, just thought I'd drop by, check in." Michael and I were talking, and we think it's time you start thinking about other living arrangements. My heart skipped a beat. "Other living arrangements?" I asked, my voice trembling. She nodded casually, as if discussing the weather. Yes, a retirement home maybe, somewhere with people your age. This house, it's big, and well, let's be honest, Margaret, it's wasted space. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My house, my sanctuary, the place where William and I had built our life together, she was already eyeing it like a hawk circling prey. And that, my dear, was when the storm truly began to form. What Rachel didn't know, what she could never have imagined, was that she had just stepped onto a battlefield she was destined to lose. Because while she saw an old woman standing in a garden apron, I knew the truth. Strength isn't measured in youth or in sharp words. Real strength is quiet, patient, and rooted deep like the roses I had planted years ago. I smiled faintly, masking the fire that burned inside me. "We'll see about that, Rachel," I whispered under my breath. And from that day forward, the game changed. But she had no idea just how far I was willing to go to protect what was mine. Rachel's words about other living arrangements stayed with me like a thorn under the skin. That day, after she drove off, I sat on my porch swing staring at the roses William and I had planted together decades ago. Each bloom carried a memory. Our first year of marriage, Michael's first steps, the anniversaries we had celebrated. This house wasn't just wood and bricks, it was the fabric of my entire life. And yet, here was my daughter-in-law, circling like a vulture, already plotting how to take it away. Days passed, but I couldn't shake the unease. Michael visited less and less. When he did come by, Rachel was always with him, her eyes scanning the rooms as though measuring where her furniture might fit someday. It made me feel like a guest in my own home, even before she tried to make it so. Still, I didn't want to believe it would come to anything. Surely my son wouldn't allow it. Surely blood would win over convenience. But I was wrong. One Friday evening, I was in the kitchen stirring a pot of soup when the phone rang. Michael's voice came through the line, hesitant, nervous. "Mom, Rachel and I think it's best if you move into assisted living. You know, somewhere with nurses and activities. We worry about you being alone in that big house." The spoon clattered from my hand into the pot. "Michael," I whispered, my throat tight. "This is my home. I raised you here. Your father built this with his own hands. I'm not going anywhere." There was silence, then a soft sigh. "Mom, please don't make this harder. Rachel says—" I cut him off. "Rachel says, or you say, Michael?" The line went dead. That night, I sat at the dining room table long after the soup had grown cold, staring at the flickering candlelight. For the first time in my life, I felt truly invisible to my own child. But nothing prepared me for what happened next. A week later, I went into town for groceries, just as I had on countless Fridays before. The sun was setting by the time I returned, my bags heavy with bread, milk, and fresh apples for pie. As I walked up the steps to my porch, I noticed Rachel's car parked in the driveway. My heart sank. I hurried to the door, fumbling for the knob, but when I turned it, it didn't move. Locked. I knocked, then pounded. "Rachel? It's me, Margaret. Open this door right now." Silence. Then the sound of footsteps. She appeared on the other side of the glass window, her smile sharp as a blade. "You don't live here anymore," she said sweetly. And before I could answer, she slammed the door and twisted the lock. The groceries slipped from my arms, apples rolling across the wooden planks of the porch. My chest tightened, my breath caught in my throat. For 70 years I had faced storms, loss, and loneliness, but never had I been treated like this. Not in my own home. I stood frozen, staring at the door, hearing faint laughter from inside. My son's laughter. In that moment, something inside me shifted. My grief hardened into resolve. My shock turned into fire. Because Rachel didn't know. She didn't know the secret of this house. She didn't know about the key. And that was the very thing that would undo her. I bent down, picked up my scattered groceries with trembling hands, and walked slowly to the edge of the porch. I didn't cry. Not then. I only whispered to myself, "So this is how it begins." The night air grew colder, the stars brighter above, as I stepped away from the home I had built with my husband. Rachel thought she had locked me out, thought she had stripped me of everything. But she had only unlocked the beginning of her own downfall. And I knew, as surely as I knew my own name, that this was far from over. That night, after Rachel slammed the door in my face, I wandered down the street with the grocery bags cutting into my palms. I didn't know where to go. Neighbors' lights glowed warm behind their curtains, but I couldn't bring myself to knock. Pride held me back. I couldn't let anyone see that the woman I had welcomed into my family had just thrown me out like a stranger. So I walked. My feet carried me to the old park where William and I used to bring Michael when he was little. The swings creaked in the wind. The slide glistened with dew. I sat down on a bench, my heart heavier than the bags at my feet. "Why, Lord?" I whispered into the night sky. "Why my own child? Why my own home?" The cold bit through my sweater, and I shivered, but I didn't move. I sat there for hours, staring at the stars, trying to find an answer. When the church bell rang midnight, I finally rose, carried my groceries to the small shed at the edge of my garden, and stayed there until morning. It was not much, just a wooden space William once used for tools, but at least it had a roof. That was one of the lowest points in my 70 years of life. Alone in the dark, with nothing but a lantern and the smell of old paint, I felt stripped of everything. But lows have a way of testing your spirit. The next day, I brushed myself off, fixed a cup of tea with the little kettle in the shed, and reminded myself who I was. I was Margaret Evans, daughter of a carpenter and a schoolteacher, wife of William, mother of Michael. My life had been built on faith and work, not on the whims of a daughter-in-law who had never known real struggle. Still, I knew I couldn't pretend nothing had happened. That Sunday, I dressed in my best church outfit and went to service as I always did. People greeted me warmly. "Good morning, Margaret. Lovely to see you. How are you doing these days?" I smiled and nodded. But inside, I was carrying a secret storm. After service, Pastor John asked if I was all right. He must have seen the weariness in my eyes. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just a little tired." He patted my shoulder gently. "Remember, Margaret, storms come, but the Lord never leaves us. Sometimes what feels like the end is just the start of His greater plan." I nodded, though my heart was still heavy. Later that week, Michael came to see me. I was back in the house, then Rachel hadn't expected me to return so soon, and she certainly didn't know how. He found me in the kitchen, rolling out dough for apple pie, as if nothing had happened. "Mom," he said softly, almost guilty, "Rachel told me. She told me you were upset." I didn't look up. I kept kneading the dough. "Upset? Michael! She locked me out of my own home." His face paled. He tried to explain, fumbling for words. "She didn't mean it like that. She just thinks it's safer if—" I slammed the rolling pin onto the counter, startling him. "Safer? I raised you in this house. I built this home with your father. Don't you dare tell me it isn't mine." He looked like a boy again in that moment, ashamed and uncertain. But before he could answer, Rachel appeared in the doorway. Her smile was thin, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Oh, Margaret, you must have gotten confused. You probably misplaced your key, and in the dark it felt like the door was locked. That's all." I stared at her, my hands trembling, my heart pounding. She was lying to my face. twisting the truth as though I were some senile old woman who couldn't tell the difference between reality and imagination. Michael glanced between us, unsure whom to believe. That was the moment I realized something vital. This wasn't just about Rachel wanting my house. It was about control. She wanted to erase my place in my son's life, rewrite the story so that I looked weak, forgetful, and helpless. But she had underestimated me. Because what she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I had something she couldn't take. A secret no lock could keep out. A key that wasn't just metal, but memory and foresight. I said nothing then. I only smiled faintly, wiped my hands on my apron, and told them, "Don't worry, everything will come to light in time." Rachel narrowed her eyes, suspicious. Michael looked confused, but I left it at that. Inside, though, I felt the fire rising again, and that fire blazed hotter the following week, when I returned home one evening to find the locks changed. It was a Tuesday evening when I returned from the market, my arms heavy with bags of fresh vegetables. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. My heart, though bruised from recent days, had settled into a rhythm of stubborn peace. I told myself I would not let Rachel steal my joy. But as I reached the front porch, something caught my eye. The locks, shiny, new, and unfamiliar, gleamed in the fading light. I froze. My hands trembled as I set the grocery bags down. Slowly, I tried my old key. It didn't fit, not even close. For a moment, my knees weakened, and the world tilted beneath me. Then I heard laughter inside. A woman's laugh, Rachel's laugh. I knocked, harder this time. "Michael, open this door right now!" The laughter stopped. Footsteps approached. Then, through the glass, Rachel's face appeared, framed by the soft glow of my living room lamp. She looked at me the way a cat looks at a cornered mouse. "Oh, Margaret," she said sweetly, "didn't Michael tell you? We decided to update the locks. For safety, of course. You know, neighborhoods aren't what they used to be." "Give me my key," I demanded, my voice sharp. The voice of the woman who had raised a son, buried a husband, and endured storms far stronger than this. Rachel tilted her head, her smile widening. "This isn't your home anymore, Margaret. You really should start accepting that." Through the corner of my eye, I saw Michael in the hallway. He looked torn, his hands jammed into his pockets. He didn't say a word. I felt my heart twist in my chest, not just at Rachel's cruelty, but at my son's silence. That silence hurt worse than the lock. Rachel leaned closer to the glass, her voice a whisper only I could hear. "It's time you learned your place." And then, with a deliberate slowness, she pulled the curtain shut, leaving me standing on the porch like an outsider. The bags at my feet felt suddenly heavy. The weight of carrots and potatoes, nothing compared to the weight in my chest. But even as my hands shook, a strange calm settled over me. She thought she had won. She thought a shiny new lock could erase me from my own life. But Rachel didn't know the truth. She didn't know that while she was busy changing locks, I had been busy remembering something she would never think to ask. The hidden place, the hidden key, and the hidden power of a woman who had been underestimated for far too long. I bent down, picked up my groceries, and whispered under my breath, "So this is the game you want to play." The porch light flickered above me as the night grew darker, and in that moment I made myself a promise. Rachel had drawn the battle lines. She believed she had locked me out. But soon, very soon, she would learn who truly held the key. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the shed at the edge of my yard, the lantern flickering weakly, the smell of soil and rusted tools around me. My heart pounded with anger, but my mind was sharp, clearer than it had been in years. Rachel thought she was clever, changing the locks, shutting me out. But she had no idea that William and I had built this house with more than just wood and nails. He had been a careful man, thoughtful to the last detail. One day, he used to say, "Life may test us in ways we can't predict. Always have a plan B, Margaret." That plan B was hidden beneath the very floorboards of our home. Years ago, William had shown me a small iron key, different from the others. "This is the master key," he'd whispered, placing it in my hand. "It opens more than doors. It opens the life we've built, even if someone tries to take it away." He made me promise to keep it safe, hidden where no one, not even Michael, would know. And I had. For decades, it had rested in a little wooden box tucked behind the beams of the shed. That night, as the wind howled outside, I pulled it out. The iron was cold and heavy, carrying not just metal but memory. I closed my eyes, pressing it to my chest. "William," I whispered, "you knew I'd need this one day, didn't you?" The weight of that key filled me with something Rachel couldn't touch: power. Still, I didn't rush. Revenge is like bread, it needs time to rise. If you act too quickly, it collapses. The next morning, I carried myself to the kitchen window of my own house. From outside, I watched Rachel bustling about in her robe, humming as though she had already claimed victory. Michael sat at the table, his eyes glued to his coffee cup. He looked tired, worn down, caught between his wife and his mother, but too weak to fight for me. For a moment, pain cut through me. That was my boy in there, eating breakfast in the kitchen I had once filled with love and laughter. I remembered his little feet running across those very floors, the way he'd tug my apron saying, "Pie! Mama! Pie!" And now, I was watching him from the cold side of the glass. A low point, yes, but even in that pain, I felt something stirring. Resolve. Later that day, I went into town. The librarian, Mrs. Whitaker, greeted me warmly. "Margaret, we haven't seen you in a while." I smiled faintly, hiding my turmoil. "Just needed some books, dear." I checked out volumes on property law, home ownership, and tenant rights. People might think a 70-year-old woman has no fight left in her, but I intended to prove them wrong. If Rachel wanted a war, I was going to fight it with both wisdom and fire. That evening, I walked back to the shed, set the books on the table, and studied them by lantern light. I underlined, scribbled notes, and muttered to myself, "She thinks she can erase me. She thinks wrong." But the true turning point of that week came unexpectedly. I was hanging laundry in the yard when a little voice called out, "Mrs. Evans!" It was Tommy, the neighbor's boy, clutching a baseball in his small hands. He had accidentally tossed it into my yard. I bent down, picked it up, and handed it back with a smile. "Thank you," he said, beaming. In that moment, a memory surfaced. Michael at the same age, running through these very yards, laughing, carefree. My heart ached, but it also reminded me of something crucial. Children see truth clearly. They know kindness when they feel it. And that gave me an idea. Rachel had poisoned Michael against me, but she couldn't erase the years of love we had shared. Deep down, my son was still there. If I wanted him back, I needed to remind him of who I was, not through shouting, not through bitterness, but through truth and patience. But before I could begin that quiet work, another storm hit. That Friday night, I came home from choir practice and found Rachel in my yard, speaking to a man I didn't recognize. He wore a suit and carried a clipboard. I stayed hidden behind the rose bushes, listening. "So, the property is in transition?" the man asked. Rachel nodded eagerly. "Yes. My husband and I will be the new owners soon. I just need to finalize some details." The words sent ice through my veins. Transition? New owners? What was she plotting? I clutched the iron key in my pocket, my heart racing. This was bigger than I thought. She wasn't just trying to push me out, she was trying to steal everything. And that, my dear, was the night I realized Rachel wasn't just cruel. She was dangerous. The next morning, I woke before the Sunday. The air was crisp, and the sky still wore its blanket of gray. I held the iron key in my hand, running my thumb over its jagged edges. My heart pounded as if it already knew what I was about to do. I waited until I saw Michael's car pull away for work. Rachel never rose early. She liked to lounge around in her silk robe, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone like a queen on her throne. This was my moment. I approached the front door slowly, the way a soldier approaches a battlefield. My knees ached, but my spirit was steady. The new locks gleamed at me, daring me to try. I slipped the ironed key into the hidden slot just beneath the doorframe, a place no ordinary eye would notice. With a firm twist, I heard it. Click. The sound was sharp, victorious, like a trumpet announcing my arrival. The door eased open. My living room smelled like lavender air freshener and Rachel's perfume. My own house, but it felt foreign now, dressed in someone else's choices. A throw blanket I'd never seen lay across my couch. Pictures of Rachel and Michael sat on the mantel, but none of William, none of me. She had already started rewriting the story of this home. I clenched my fists. From the kitchen came the sound of humming. Rachel's voice, carefree, oblivious. I stepped softly across the floorboards. Each creak felt like a gunshot, but still, she didn't notice. I stopped just at the edge of the kitchen doorway. There she was, hair pinned up, robe flowing, pouring herself a fresh cup of coffee. She swayed slightly as she hummed, as if she had not a single worry in the world. I let the silence stretch, let the tension coil like a snake ready to strike. Then, in a voice as calm as still water, I spoke. "Enjoying my coffee, are you, Rachel?" The mug slipped from her hand, shattering against the tiles. Hot liquid spread across the floor, and she spun around, her face pale as snow. How did you get in here?" she stammered, clutching the counter. I stepped forward, each word deliberate. "You thought you locked me out. You thought a shiny new lock could erase me. But you don't know this house like I do." Her eyes darted to the door, then back to me, wide with disbelief. For once, her perfect composure cracked. "This is my home," I continued, my voice rising, steady and unshakable. "My blood, my sweat, my memories live in these walls, and you will never, never take it from me." For a long moment, the only sound was the dripping of coffee onto the tiles. Rachel swallowed hard, then forced a shaky smile. "You don't know what you're doing, Margaret. You're only making things worse for yourself." But her voice wavered, betraying her. I stepped closer, close enough to see the fear flickering in her eyes. "You've underestimated me for the last time," I said, my hand tightening around the iron key. And just as I turned toward the living room, ready to reclaim my seat, there was a sharp knock at the door. Rachel's eyes widened. Who could that be?" she whispered. I didn't answer, but my chest tightened. Something told me that knock was not a friendly one. The knock came again, louder this time. 3 firm raps that rattled the door in its frame. Rachel froze, her knuckles white against the counter, her eyes darting to me and then to the door, as if searching for an escape. I stayed where I was, my hand still curled around the iron key. "Well," I said, my voice low, "aren't you going to see who it is?" Rachel swallowed hard and hurried across the living room. Her silk robe trailed behind her, whispering against the floor. She cracked the door just an inch, but the man outside pushed it open with authority. It was him, the suited man from last night, the one with the clipboard. "Morning," he said briskly, stepping into my home like it was already his. He adjusted his tie, scanning the room. His gaze landed on me, and for a brief moment, his eyes narrowed. Then he smiled, a smile too polished to be kind. "Mrs. Whitaker, I presume." Rachel's face drained of color. "Wait, you two know each other?" I raised my chin, my voice steady. "I don't know him, but I know his type." The man cleared his throat. "My name is Mr. Harlan. I'm here to finalize some paperwork regarding this property." He shot Rachel a quick glance, the kind that said, "Stay quiet and let me handle this." But Rachel couldn't help herself. "She wasn't supposed to be here. I told you she's out. She's gone. How did you even get inside?" Her words tumbled out, shrill and panicked. I turned slowly toward her, letting the silence stretch until she squirmed. Then, holding up the iron key between two fingers, I said, "This house has secrets you'll never understand." Mr. Harlan's smile faltered. His eyes lingered on the key, then shifted back to me with a new edge of caution. "I think," I said firmly, "it's time for you to explain exactly what business you have with my daughter-in-law, because I already know enough to call this what it is: fraud." Rachel gasped, but I didn't flinch. Mr. Harlan's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth to speak, but before a single word escaped, the front door slammed shut behind him. Someone else had entered. And when I turned, my heart stopped. Standing there in the doorway was Michael, my son. His eyes flicked between me, Rachel, and Mr. Harlan. Confusion clouded his face, but beneath it was something else, something dangerous. "What?" he asked slowly, his voice low and heavy. "Is going on here?" The room went still. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Rachel's lips parted, ready to spin her lies. Mr. Harlan straightened his tie, already composing his defense. And me? I tightened my grip on the key, ready to speak the truth. But before I could utter a word, Michael turned his gaze on me sharp, questioning, almost accusing. "Mom," he said, his tone cutting like a blade, "why are you in our house?" For a moment, the room tilted. Michael's words echoed in my ears, slicing deeper than Rachel's cruelty ever could. "Our house," he'd said. "Not my home, not the place where you raised me, but our house," like I had already been written out of its story. I steadied myself, drawing in a slow breath. My heart ached, but my voice came out calm. "Michael, this is my home. Your father built this house with his bare hands. I've lived here longer than you've been alive." But Michael's face was unreadable, shadowed by the morning light pouring in through the window. He glanced at Rachel, whose eyes were brimming with rehearsed innocence. "She's trespassing," Rachel said quickly, clutching her robe tight around her chest. "I told you she forced her way in. Michael, she's unstable. She threatened me." "That's a lie," I snapped, my patience breaking. I lifted the key high in my hand, the iron glinting. "I didn't force my way in. This house still recognizes who it belongs to." Michael's eyes dropped to the key, confusion flashing across his face. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Mr. Harlan stepped forward smoothly, like a snake slithering into a gap. "Mr. Whitaker," he said, his tone oily and professional, "your wife has already discussed with me the process of transferring this property into your name. It's a simple matter of paperwork. Once completed, your mother will be—" "Stop right there," I cut him off, my voice rising like thunder. "You think you can waltz into my home and strip me of it with a pen and paper? Not while I still draw breath." Rachel gasped dramatically. You see? You see how she talks? Michael, she's threatening us." But Michael didn't look at her. His gaze was locked on me, his jaw tight, his brow furrowed. I could see the boy I raised flickering inside him, the boy who once cried when his father cut his hand with a hammer, the boy who promised to take care of me when I grew old. "Mom," he began, his voice low, uncertain. And then Rachel seized his arm, clinging like ivy. "Michael, don't listen to her. She doesn't want what's best for us. She's trying to ruin everything we've built. You have to choose." The room froze. Her words hung in the air, poisonous and heavy. "You have to choose." Michael's face went pale. His eyes darted between us. Me, the mother who gave him life, and Rachel, the woman who now pulled his strings. I took a step forward, my voice breaking but strong. "Michael, listen to me. This house isn't just bricks and wood. It's your father's blood, his memory. Do you really want to hand it over to someone who sees me as nothing more than a nuisance?" Rachel's nails dug into his arm. "If you don't do this, Michael, we'll lose everything. Don't let her destroy us." For a long, agonizing moment, Michael stood frozen. And then he tore his arm free. Both Rachel and I gasped, but before I could rejoice, his words cut like a knife. "I need time to think," he said, his voice cold, his eyes unreadable. "But until then, Mom, I don't want you here." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt my knees weaken, my own son casting me out. Rachel's lips curved into a slow, triumphant smile, while Mr. Harlan adjusted his tie, already imagining the ink drying on the papers. But even as my heart shattered, I closed my hand around the iron key. Michael thought he was sending me away. Rachel thought she had won. They were both wrong. Because the moment I stepped outside that door, I swore to myself this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The door closed behind me with a hollow thud, and I stood on the porch staring at the wood grain as though it had just betrayed me. My son's words lingered in my ears like poison. "Mom, I don't want you here." The ache in my chest was heavy, but not crushing. No, what I felt was sharper, clearer. It was resolve. I gripped the iron key tight in my palm and whispered to the empty air, "You'll regret siding with her, Michael. Not because I'll punish you, but because one day you'll see the truth." The morning air was cool as I walked down the porch steps, my bag clutched close. My neighbor, Mrs. Carter, waved from across the street, her little terrier yapping at her feet. I forced a smile, not ready to explain why I looked like a stranger at my own home. Instead, I walked. My steps carried me to the library, a quiet place Rachel would never think to search. It had been years since I'd stepped inside, but the smell of books and dust wrapped around me like an old friend. I pulled out a chair, set my bag down, and took a notebook from the shelf. My hands trembled slightly, but I steadied them. If Rachel wanted a war, then I needed ammunition. And not the kind made of bullets, but secrets. Rachel's arrogance had given me clues. Her words about insurance updates, her too familiar touch on that Mr. Harlan's arm, the way she tossed around ownership as though marriage had made her queen. So I started digging. The library had an old public computer. I sat at it, squinting at the screen as I typed Rachel's full name into the search bar. Rachel Lynn Matthews Whitaker. It didn't take long before something curious appeared. An old court record, faint but clear. A small claim suit filed against Rachel Matthews 6 years ago in another state. A landlord accusing her of fraud. My heart quickened. I clicked again, finding a pattern. Rachel had skipped apartments, left unpaid bills, even changed addresses like a snake shedding its skin. There were whispers of debts, lawsuits, and even a restraining order filed by a woman whose husband Rachel had befriended. Piece by piece, her mask began to crack. But then I found something that made me sit back in my chair, my breath catching. A marriage license. Not to Michael, to another man. From 4 years ago. No record of a divorce. My pulse thundered in my ears. If this was true, Rachel wasn't just manipulative, she was committing bigamy. Everything she stood to gain from Michael, from the house, from me, It could all collapse like a sandcastle under a wave. I closed the computer slowly, my hand steady now. Rachel had locked me out, painted me as unstable, turned my son against me. But what she didn't know was that I now held something far more powerful than a key. I held the truth. I slipped the notebook into my bag and stood, shoulders squared. But as I turned to leave, my heart nearly stopped. Because standing at the entrance of the library, staring directly at me with wide, furious eyes, was Rachel. The words, "It's time," clanged around in my mind like church bells gone mad. Rachel's smile through the glass doors wasn't the smile of someone bluffing. It was the smile of someone who had already pulled the trigger. Mrs. Carter squeezed my shoulder gently. "Margaret, dear, you're shaking. What's going on?" I forced a weak smile, not wanting to drag her into this storm. "I'll be fine, Dorothy. Thank you." But inside, my chest was pounding. Rachel was moving faster than I thought. Whatever plan she had been whispering into that phone was already in motion. I left the library, the notebook heavy in my bag, and hurried down the street. Every step I took, I expected Rachel's car to screech around the corner, or that suited man, Mr. Harlan, to emerge with another sheaf of papers, ready to strip me of everything. When I reached Mrs. Carter's porch, her little terrier barked like a tiny alarm. Dorothy insisted I come inside for tea, and though I longed to retreat and think, I agreed. Sitting at her kitchen table, with the smell of chamomile filling the air, I almost let myself relax. Almost. Because 10 minutes later, there was a sharp knock at the door. Dorothy frowned. Who could that be? She shuffled to the door and pulled it open. 2 uniformed officers stood on the porch. My breath caught. "Good morning, ma'am," one of them said. "We're looking for Margaret Whittaker." My teacup rattled as I set it down. Dorothy's hand flew to her mouth. "What on earth is this about?" The officer's expression was neutral, almost bored. "We received a report. A woman matching Mrs. Whittaker's description was seen trespassing and making threats at a private residence." Dorothy gasped. "That's ridiculous!" But my heart sank. Rachel. This was Rachel's strike. It's time. This is what she meant. I stood slowly, my dignity wrapped around me like armor. "I am Margaret Whittaker," I said clearly, "and I've trespassed nowhere. That house is mine." The younger officer shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, we don't want any trouble, but we'll need you to come with us and answer some questions." Dorothy clutched my arm. "This is absurd. You can't just drag her off. She's 70 years old." But the officers weren't listening. They stepped forward, and for the first time in my life, I felt the cold bite of handcuffs brushing against my wrist. Dorothy cried out, "This is wrong! You're making a mistake!" And as the officers led me out of her house and down the walkway, I saw a car parked just across the street. Rachel sat inside, sunglasses perched on her face, phone pressed to her ear. She raised her hand and gave me a slow, mocking wave. My stomach dropped, but I lifted my chin. She thought she had won. She thought this was the end. But she didn't know what I carried in my bag, the notebook, the records, the secrets that could tear her carefully crafted mask to shreds. And as the squad car door closed behind me, I whispered under my breath, "This isn't over." Not by a long shot. David Jacobs had a way of commanding a room without raising his voice. Even Sergeant Keller, who had moments earlier looked ready to dismiss me as a senile trespasser, leaned back in his chair and listened. "The law is simple," David said, his voice smooth. "Ownership is determined by proof, not by who happens to be standing inside the house at the moment. Mrs. Whittaker says the deed is in that home, locked away in a safe. That safe, by extension, belongs to her. She has every right to reclaim her property." Keller hesitated. Without a warrant, we can't just storm the house and— David cut him off gently. Then we don't storm, we strategize. His sharp gray eyes slid to me. Margaret, are you willing to take a risk? I lifted my chin. Rachel took my husband's house, my family, and tried to strip me of my dignity. I've been locked out like a beggar. I have nothing left but risk. That earned the faintest smile from him. By evening, David had secured my release. Rachel hadn't expected I'd walk free so soon. I imagined her pacing in my kitchen, pouring wine from my decanter, and laughing to herself about how easily she had won. But the night was just beginning. We met in David's car, parked 2 streets away from the house. The glow of the porch light bled faintly through the trees. My chest ached as I stared at it, my home, lit up but foreign, like a stranger wearing my clothes. David unlatched a leather folder and laid out a plan. We need the deed. Once we have it, Rachel can't spin her lies. But if she's already rifled through the safe, we'll need something else. Something she doesn't expect. What do you mean? I asked. David reached into his briefcase and pulled out a slim black device. At first glance, it looked like a phone, but the blinking light told me otherwise. It's a recorder, he explained. Highly sensitive. Picked it up during a case last year. If Rachel is conspiring with someone and you said you've seen her meeting with a man, then we may not need to break into the safe. We let her talk. People who think they've already won tend to gloat. The plan was madness, but there was a terrible elegance to it. So we waited in silence until midnight, the house quiet, except for the occasional flicker of shadows in the living room window. Rachel wasn't alone. When the time came, David placed the device under the porch, step an old wooden plank that creaked when you pressed too hard. Close enough to pick up a conversation, he murmured, but far enough that she won't notice. We retreated into the car, hidden in the shadows. Minutes stretched into hours. Then, just as fatigue began to drag at my eyelids, I saw the faint outline of a man stepping into the living room. Rachel appeared beside him, wine glass in hand, her laughter cutting through the still night. The recorder's light blinked. It was catching every word. David leaned forward, eyes glinting. Here we go. And then we heard it. Rachel's voice, Rachel's laugh carried through the night, spilling secrets and we weren't supposed to hear. The recorder blinked steadily under the porch step, everything, pulling in every poisoned word. You don't have to worry, Martin, she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. By next month, that old woman won't even have her name on a scrap of paper. The house, the accounts, it'll all be ours. Martin. So that was his name. His reply was deeper, cautious. You're sure the bank won't ask questions? Her husband's accounts were in his name. Rachel scoffed. Please, do you think I haven't done my homework? Walter left more than just the house. Life insurance, bonds, savings she doesn't even know exist. Once the paperwork clears, it's mine. She'll be left chasing ghosts while I live like a queen. I gripped David's arm, my nails digging in, my breath trembled in my chest. Walter had always been careful with money, but he had never told me there were other accounts. Why hadn't he trusted me? Or perhaps he had planned to reveal them in his own time. Rachel's voice sliced through again. The police? They'll believe anything I say. Sweet little daughter-in-law taking care of her husband's grieving mother. Meanwhile, she's senile, paranoid, lashing out. I even got her hauled to the station today. Martin chuckled. You're ruthless. Rachel's tone sharpened, a venom I hadn't heard before. Ruthless keeps me alive. That house isn't just a roof, it's a symbol. I'll burn it to the ground before I let her step foot in it again. My heart froze. Burn it. David leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Did you hear that? She just crossed into criminal threat territory. I nodded, but my throat was dry, words stuck behind my teeth. This wasn't just greed anymore, it was war. Then Rachel said something that made my blood run cold. "And as for that safe she keeps bragging about, it's already empty. I made sure of it." David's jaw tightened. "That's impossible. If she's telling the truth, she already has the deed." Martin asked the same question I wanted to scream. "Then why are you still here? Why not sell it off and leave?" Rachel sipped her wine, the sound crisp against the recorder's mic. "Because power feels better when you flaunt it. She'll keep fighting, and I'll keep winning. And every time she thinks she's close, I'll slam the door in her face again." I couldn't breathe. My chest ached, fury swelling like a storm. David reached into his folder, pulled out a pen, and scribbled something on a scrap of paper. "This is bigger than property. She's dangerous. We move tomorrow." But before I could respond, Rachel's voice rose again, louder, triumphant. "When she's broken enough, I'll put her in a home. One of those sad little places where no one remembers your name. And when she dies, no one will even notice. That's the beauty of it." The recorder caught it all. I pressed my fist against my lips to stop the cry that fought to escape. David's hand landed steady on mine. His eyes were fierce now, burning with a promise. "We've got her. This is the crack in her armor." But just then, headlights swept across the street. A car slowed in front of Rachel's house. And the man behind the wheel wasn't Martin. It was someone I hadn't seen in years. Someone I thought was gone forever. And the sight of him nearly stopped my heart. The headlights froze me where I sat, my hands trembling in my lap. The car idled at the curb, engine humming low, before the driver's door creaked open. For a moment, I thought my tired eyes were betraying me. But then he stepped into the light. "Good heavens," I whispered, clutching David's sleeve. That's Richard." David frowned. "Richard?" "My husband's brother," I breathed. "Walter's estranged brother. I haven't seen him in over 20 years. Richard Whitaker had been a ghost in our family story. A man who clashed with Walter over money, disappeared without a trace, and was only ever spoken of in whispers. And now here he was, standing on the curb outside my home, staring at the very house his brother left to me." Rachel opened the door with a flourish, her laughter spilling into the night. "Richard, finally, finally." The word hit me like a slap. This wasn't some chance reunion, this was planned. Richard strode inside, shoulders still broad, though streaked with age, his voice carrying through the recorder. "You've kept me waiting long enough, Rachel. Let's settle this once and for all." My blood went cold. David's jaw tightened. "So this goes deeper than we thought. She's aligned herself with family. That complicates things." Inside, Rachel poured another glass of wine. "Don't pout, Richard. We're on the same team now. You want what you think Walter cheated you out of. I want what's rightfully mine. Together, we can bury the old woman's claims, once and for all." I flinched at her words, "bury the old woman." Richard's reply was low, but it cut through me like glass. "You hold up your end, Rachel, and the house is ours. I'll see to it that Margaret never gets close again." David's hand closed over my wrist, steady but firm. "This is the break we needed, Margaret. 2 conspirators, 1 scheme, recorded evidence." But my heart wasn't calm, it was shattering. Walter had died believing his brother was gone, out of our lives. And yet, here he was, siding with Rachel, circling like a vulture over everything Walter built. Rachel clinked her glass against Richard's. To partnership, to power, to getting rid of her for good. The words hissed into the night, caught perfectly by the recorder. David leaned close, his eyes blazing. "This changes everything. Tomorrow, we don't just fight Rachel, we take down Richard too." But just as he said it, the porch light flickered, and for a brief, terrifying moment, I saw Rachel glance through the window, straight toward our car. Her smile widened. "Do you feel that?" she said to Richard, her voice sharp with intuition. "Like we're being watched?" Rachel's smile lingered too long at the window. Her eyes narrowed into slits, as though she could pierce the shadows where David's car Saturday. My pulse hammered so loudly I feared it would give us away. Richard shifted uneasily inside the living room. "What are you staring at?" Rachel didn't blink. "Call it instinct. I don't like feeling watched." David whispered, barely moving his lips. "Don't move. Don't even breathe too hard. She can't possibly see us from here." But Rachel's hand drifted toward the curtain, tugging it aside as though testing the night. My stomach twisted. Any second now, her gaze would lock on us, and everything we'd gathered, every whispered word on that recorder, would vanish under the weight of her vengeance. Finally, she let the curtain fall and turned back to Richard. "It's nothing, probably just a raccoon, but still, we'll need to move faster. Margaret isn't as broken as I hoped. She's stubborn." Richard snorted. "She's a 70-year-old woman. What can she really do?" Rachel's laugh was low, dangerous. "You'd be surprised." David squeezed my arm, and for a heartbeat, I saw something flicker in his eyes, admiration. As though Rachel's words, meant as mockery, had only reminded him of the fire I still carried. Inside, Rachel poured herself another drink, her voice dripping with venom. "Tomorrow we start the final stage. By the time Margaret realizes what happened, she'll be out on the street for good. And this time, she won't be coming back." I shivered. She meant to finish me. David clicked off the recorder, his jaw tight. "That's enough. We've got more than enough to bury her. We leave before she gets suspicious for real." We slid from the car as silently as shadows, retreating down the street until the glow of the house faded behind us. Only when we reached Dorothy Carter's porch did I exhale, the night air sharp in my lungs. Dorothy, still awake and waiting, pulled her robe tighter when she saw us. "What happened? You look pale as death." I lowered myself into her rocking chair, hands trembling. "Dorothy, Rachel isn't working alone. Walter's brother is with her. They mean to strip me of everything. And they don't just want my house. They want me gone." Her gasp cut through the night. "Gone? Margaret, what are you saying?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry as sand. They spoke of burning it, of putting me away in a home where I'd be forgotten. "Dorothy, they want to erase me." The rocking chair creaked beneath me, the weight of my fear pressing down. But before Dorothy could respond, the sound of tires crunching gravel drifted up the street. A car slowed in front of her house. Its headlights snapped off, leaving only the shape of a dark vehicle idling at the curb. David stiffened. We were followed. The car door opened. A silhouette stepped out, tall and deliberate, moving toward us with measured steps. Dorothy's terrier barked furiously, the little dog's cries slicing through the night. The figure stopped at the edge of the porch light, and my heart stuttered when I saw who it was. The figure stepped into the light, and for a moment, the world tilted. It was Thomas, my grandson, Walter's flesh and blood, my only grandchild. He looked older than I remembered, his face shadowed by fatigue. But those eyes, his grandfather's eyes, were unmistakable. "Grandma," he said softly, hands raised as if approaching a frightened animal. "Don't be scared. I had to find you. I know everything." Dorothy pressed a hand to her chest. "Lord, have mercy." David's gaze sharpened. "What do you mean, everything?" Thomas's jaw tightened. "Rachel and Uncle Richard. I've been listening, watching. They thought I was too wrapped up in school to notice, but I've seen the papers. I've heard the calls." He looked at me, his voice breaking. "She's been lying to me too, Grandma, pretending she wanted what was best for the family. But she wants it all your house, your name, your life." Tears blurred my eyes. My heart ached with pride and grief all at once. "Oh, Thomas." He stepped closer, urgency flickering in his voice. "She's making her move tomorrow. She told Richard she'll file forged documents first thing in the morning. If that goes through, even with the deed, you'll be trapped in court for years. We have to stop her tonight." David leaned back, his lawyer's mind already racing. "If he's right, we don't have time to wait. The recorder gives us evidence of threats, but forged documents? That's a different battlefield." Thomas's eyes hardened. "Then we fight fire with fire. You still have the key, don't you, Grandma? The one Grandpa gave you?" The world slowed. The key. For months it had sat heavy on a chain around my neck, a relic of Walter's trust. I had almost forgotten it was there. My fingers touched the cool metal now, the weight of memory flooding back. Rachel thought she had stripped me of everything. She locked me out, humiliated me, tried to erase me, but she had overlooked the simplest, most dangerous weapon of all. The true key. I lifted it from my neck, the brass gleaming under Dorothy's porch light. For the first time in weeks, a smile touched my lips. "She may own the locks," I whispered, "but I own the door." David's grin was fierce. "Then let's end this." Thomas nodded, determination blazing. "We take back the house tonight, before she destroys everything." The three of us stood together, an old woman they tried to erase, a grandson they underestimated, and a lawyer who believed in justice. The night was silent except for Dorothy's terrier growling at the dark street, as if warning the shadows themselves. And as I clenched the key in my fist, I knew one thing for certain. Rachel had declared war, but she had no idea what kind of soldier she'd awakened. The final battle was only beginning. The night air was sharp, carrying the scent of cut grass and rain-soaked earth. My fingers tightened around the key until the grooves pressed into my palm. This was more than metal. It was Walter's trust, his legacy, his reminder that strength doesn't always come with youth. Thomas's voice steadied me. "She's inside right now. If we wait until morning, it's over. We go in tonight." David nodded. "We have her threats on tape. Once we step foot inside, that house is no longer just a home. It's a crime scene." Dorothy clutched my arm. "Margaret, be careful. That woman's dangerous." Dangerous. Yes, Rachel was dangerous. But I had been underestimated my whole life, and now she would learn what it meant to push a 70-year-old woman too far. We approached the house in silence, our footsteps muffled by the damp earth. The windows glowed with warm light, laughter spilling faintly from within. Rachel and Richard were celebrating, drinking from my crystal glasses, plotting how to erase me while toasting their victory. Not tonight. I slipped the key into the lock. The mechanism turned smoothly, as though the house itself remembered me. With a soft click, the door opened. Rachel's laugh cut through the air, followed by her words. By tomorrow, she'll have nothing, just a memory fading into dust. The rage that surged in me was molten, but my voice was calm as I stepped into the doorway. "Funny," I said, my silhouette framed by the hall light, "because I'm standing right here." Rachel froze, wineglass halfway to her lips. Richard's face drained of color. "Impossible!" Rachel spat. "How?" I raised the key high enough for the light to catch it. "You locked me out, Rachel, but you forgot who really owns the key." Her eyes widened. For the first time since this nightmare began, she looked rattled. David strode in behind me, recorder in hand. "We have everything. The threats, the conspiracy, the fraud. It's over, Rachel." Thomas followed, his voice shaking but resolute. "You lied to me, to everyone. You used Grandpa's death to steal, to destroy. Not anymore." Rachel slammed her glass onto the table, shards scattering. You think anyone will believe you? It's her word against mine. Everyone already thinks she's senile. But Richard shifted uneasily, sweat beading at his temple. Rachel, the boy's here. The lawyer's here. This isn't the plan. Shut up, Richard! She snapped. Her mask was cracking, fury seething beneath. None of this matters. I still control everything, and I won't let some old woman take it back. She lunged for the safe, jerking it open to reveal papers stacked inside. Deeds, bank records, forgeries mixed with truths, proof of her greed. But Thomas was faster. He shoved it shut, slamming it against the wall. No more. Rachel whirled on him, her face twisted with rage. Ungrateful brat! I stepped forward, my voice steady, sharp as steel. Don't you dare! That boy carries Walter's name. You will not touch him. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the sound of Rachel's ragged breathing. Her chest rose and fell like a cornered predator, but the power had shifted. David lifted the recorder, pressing play. Rachel's own voice filled the room. When she's broken enough, I'll put her in a home. I'll burn it to the ground before I let her step foot in it again. Her words hung in the air like poison. Richard staggered back, muttering, We're finished. Rachel's face crumpled, fury boiling over into desperation. She grabbed the nearest bottle, hurling it across the room. It shattered against the wall, glass raining down. You think you've won? She screamed. This isn't over. I'll take everything from you. I'll see you ruined. But I stepped forward, unflinching. My voice cut through her madness. No, Rachel. You already lost the moment you underestimated me. The wail of sirens rose in the distance, David's final call before we entered. Rachel's eyes darted to the window, then back to me. And in that moment, the fire drained out of her. She realized the truth. Her empire of lies had collapsed. The officers stormed in, flashlights cutting across the chaos. Rachel fought, screaming, clawing at the air, but Richard simply slumped into a chair, defeated. As they dragged her past me, her eyes locked on mine, wild with hatred. This isn't the end, Margaret. You'll regret this. But I stood tall, the key still warm in my hand, and whispered back, No, Rachel, the end is yours. The door slammed behind her. Silence settled. Thomas wrapped his arm around my shoulders, his voice trembling. You did it, Grandma. You really did it. Tears slid down my cheeks as I clutched the key. No, Thomas, we did it. Together. The house was scarred, glass shattered, papers strewn.